Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Over-Analyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they watching them. It's also the home of the best chat on the internet, and I'm really looking forward to talking about this show with you all, and of course my co-host with the most, but especially with you out there in the internet about this movie. And this movie would be The Fabelmans. Although we did a spoiler-free review, which I'll put up somewhere, tonight we're going to do the deep dive. Anyway, where are my show notes? Where are Rob's show notes? My goodness, I don't want to know about what the heck. Here we are. Anyway, this little student film from IMDb, one of the worst log lines I've read to date. Growing up in post-war era Arizona, young Sammy Fabelman aspires to become a filmmaker as he reaches adolescence, but soon discovers a shattering family secret and explores how the power of films can help him see the truth. That is so... one of those things where you're like, oh, I think they saw the movie. They totally didn't see the movie. Anyway, it is definitely an artist's Bildungsroman, loosely based, or maybe not even loosely based, on Steven Spielberg's life, but it's also an excellent exploration of a bad marriage. It was directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Steven Spielberg and Tony Kushner. It stars Michelle Williams, Paul Dano, and as the Sammy Fabelman, introducing, although I think he's been in other stuff, Gabrielle Labelle. It also stars Julia Butters, Keely Karsten, Sophia Copera, Jeannie Berlin, Robin Bartlett, Sam Reckner, Oaks Fegley, Chloe East, Seth Rogen, and Judd Hirsch. Let's talk about, folks, the social nutrition checklist, if I can actually bring it up. Who knows where it is? Just a sec, folks. I'm pretty confident I have it somewhere. There we are. Anyway, would it get a reframe stamp? Good Lord, no. Would it, is it union made? Yes, it is. Would it pass the Bechdel test? I don't believe it does. Last, but certainly not least, I mean, there are some scenes where women are talking to each other, but there's always, your other characters are there, especially Sammy Fabelman. And is it a class-conscious film? Certainly not a working-class conscious film. It really is a story about, the tough life of a middle-class kid growing up. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into historicity. Folks, here's an interesting thing. It is semi-autobiographical. That's how Spielberg defines it. But I did a little bit of research, and a lot of the anecdotes, the little set pieces, the little events that happened in this film, are, at least it's how Spielberg remembers his childhood. So I will put a link in the description, reality versus history, or real history versus I'll put a link to kind of a breakdown, almost sequence by sequence, down in the description. Another interesting thing I found is there is a end scene with a famous director, and John Ford. Sammy has this interaction. Spielberg, I found a video where Spielberg tells this story as it happened to him when he was a young man. So I'll also put a link to that in the description. I have not yet. This was later stuff. Anyway, I think that's about it. I think it's time to bring in my co-host with the most. Oh my goodness. And yet another time that I've had my co-host muted.
Uh-oh.
Ah! Anyway, sorry about that, folks. Jim, why don't you say hi to everyone in the chat?
Hi, folks. You heard none of my genius, my stumbling genius earlier.
None of his genius. What the heck is that?
This is only the second time that we've been using this particular software, so it's still a little bit of a beta test, I guess. But,
I do want everyone, Jim did note it before, he's gotten a new camera, and I think you will see that. He's also got a new camera and a new microphone. So we're getting fancy schmancy. I'm using a different microphone. Jim's got my old to him or old to me, but new to him, and wasn't even that old to me. So hopefully our production values have moved up, even if my ability to actually produce a live show is still somewhat degraded. Anyway, Jim, is it time to get into the spoiler zone?
Yeah, I think so. Just so we don't upset any folks there, but yeah.
All right. Okay. Let us get into that then. The spoiler zone, everybody. And we are talking about the Fabelmans. And let's do this. Jim, I wanted to ask you, before we formally jumped into craft and story and meaning and everything, do you think we should be now just referring to Michelle Williams as the new greatest of all time, the new GOAT?
Yeah, I mean, she picks challenging roles, number one. I haven't seen them all. Just in watching different reviews of this, they've mentioned, movies of hers that I haven't seen. She, she's got sometimes a bit of an experimental vibe, but yeah, she's always super believable. As I said,
right?
On the parking lot review, on paper, it's sort of for actresses that are maybe not in their 20s anymore, playing the mom is sort of like the consolation prize,
or even a risk to their career.
Yeah. But you'd be mistaken for thinking that doesn't make it a complex role, and man, she pulls it off, and makes it. It's quite fascinating. Yeah, she's presenting herself as a mom, and on the interior, she's struggling quite mightily. So, yeah, and it's great, and you see both working at the same time on a regular basis. But you'd also be mistaken to think that it's a stylized portrayal, but that I think is the face that she's putting on, because she comes across as kind of like almost a 50s TV mom, but you're just seeing that that's what she's trying to offer the world as her as her mask, essentially.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't, at no time does it, so many of these things, especially 50s, well, that's 70 years ago, people have been born, lived, and passed away since that era, which this is firmly set in, let's say, the late 50s and early to mid 60s.
Yeah.
You can run into it almost being like a caricature, and her performance, it's funny, we had brought this up when we talked about A Christmas Story a couple of weeks ago, how in the cars weren't, again, fetishized. There wasn't that object fetishization. There's certainly a middle-class family on the way up. The houses always get nicer and they get prettier, but you don't feel like it's, except maybe his memories, his experience with his old girlfriend, or an amalgam of Steven Spielberg's, girlfriends. Monica, played by Chloe East, who I also thought was another standout, somebody to keep an eye on, right?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. She was fantastic.
Let me ask you this: was there, and I have one, it may be the same one, but how long do you think? Actually, never scratch that. That's another question. What's your favorite line from this flick?
Oh, I'm just looking at my notes here. I think there's a couple things, and they have to do with around the idea of storytelling. And when he's talking to when our young Sammy is talking to his great uncle, what was it, Boris? Uncle Boris, played by Judd Hirsch. They're having a bit of a back and forth, and he said, "I'm like you. I'm an artist." And Sammy says, "Lion taming is an art," because this was a circus performer. And he says immediately, well, he says, what does he say? Putting your head in the lion's mouth is management.
Is balls. Is balls.
Yes. And taking it out is the art.
Yeah.
So I'm paraphrasing very poorly.
I think not getting bitten off or something to that effect. Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was a great line. And I think leads me to the next question. I'm saving my favorite line for later.
Sure.
Leads me to the next question. What was one of the favorite moments in the film?
It kind of came out of nowhere, but the emergence of this Monica as his first serious girlfriend, just sort of like Sammy was being interrogated by somebody that he caused a little bit of trouble for, and she was there with her girlfriend.
We're in the spoiler zone.
Yeah, and this girl Monica is sort of just there for support, and she ends up coming on to him and inviting him back to her house, and just that whole progression, and the way that the actress sort of just lay into this kind of, I don't know what it was, kind of a hyperactive, super religious, very Christian girl. It was just comical, but not a caricature.
Yeah,
verging on it a little bit, but the energy was just really took over for a few minutes, and she was great.
Well, but even the start of that scene, like you meet her, and she is. I remember like at moments in that scene, folks. The scene, Sammy has been forced by one of his bullies to go tell a girlfriend he didn't see what he obviously saw. So, of course, he's telling him a lie because he doesn't get punched in the nose again. The bully does what bullies do.
Yeah.
And the girls, these teenage girls, of course, they respond in a way, I suspect, well, that's very irresponsible. You should be more considerate of people. And they're both double teaming him. And he's like, this sucks.
I'm sad.
It sucks. I'm lying and I'm getting a lecture, and they're just knit. But then they're like, it's almost on a dime, and it feels so discombobulating.
Yeah.
But they move in because I think it's almost like it's like a set piece as young people, young women, at least in my high school experience would plan it out, kind of set the scene. And it's like, and they catch him on the lie. If it was all made up, why red hair? And that was a great moment. I love it.
Yeah, it's just fun, and just the energy that it brought to the whole movie is
Before I move into story and all, how long do you think it's going to take, Jim, for people? It is a story about a young man becoming a filmmaker. How long do you think we're going to, before we start seeing videos breaking down the film as just a big metaphor, almost allegory to filmmaking? There is, because in some ways it's, of course, Sammy is the artist, the auteur, the filmmaking auteur. He has sisters who are basically like his crew and exploited extras and B actors and all his buddies. But there's his mom, who's definitely the actress who performs best. He loves to watch her through the lens. But she loves everything he does. The actress who's like, this is the director I will do anything for. While the father is the producer. It's like, well, I guess I'm financing this whole operation, and no one appreciates how I'm keeping the house up. I guess I'm one of the first. There you go. There's the filmmaker. But is that, like, sometimes I look at those things and I'm like, well, okay, I saw a great video another day where a guy says, listen, everyone, all these people who make movies are seeing it through a filmmaker's lens. So you're going to see these things in every movie.
Yeah.
What do you think? Am I talking out of my ass there? Or?
No. I think, it's funny. Yeah. The cranky producer versus the, totally into it team members, sort of like the Bert and Ernie, model of what kind of person you're going to be. But I was sort of thinking, so yeah, I think those are coming. But I was also thinking of Spielberg's, from this movie and actually from Saving Private Ryan too, his sort of take on storytelling, because we remember there's the character of the writer in Saving Private Ryan who in the one specific horrifying scene when one of the characters on our side gets stabbed to death, he's left sort of stabbed to death very slowly. He just sort of sits there watching. He's sort of, as the writer, kind of, he's the observer, but he's sort of impotent in that case. So that was both a sort of a micro and macro kind of a metaphor for a bunch of things. I'm thinking that he has sort of a complicated relationship with his role as a storyteller in the first place. I'd have to look back at maybe writer types and other things that he's done, but the Saving Private Ryan one is the sort of the one that leaps to mind for me anyway. But yeah, I think future analysis will be breaking that down as you described it.
Okay. Anything else you want to add regarding The Craft before
we were talking in the parking lot review about it being kind of a more subtle Spielberg. And I know, some people don't think he's subtle at all or what have you. I've personally enjoyed a lot of his movies, and I was thinking afterwards, and I was kind of thinking the score is a lot different, and it is John Williams, but because the mother was a semi-pro piano pianist, that a lot of it's Bach and Baroque music and that kind of thing. And it's really not that same, I don't want to say wall of sound, and as much as I like John Williams, it's not the same John Williams treatment. And maybe it's that is one of the more subtle things about the movie is the choice of music. I don't know. I was just sort of toying with that. Do you think I'm onto something, or
you're right. Like that was something you brought up earlier, and I think it's almost this is in a piece with the storytelling itself. Because you're right. It's not that he can't have quiet moments, but Spielberg is almost always a master of gas, and then I'm going to let off the gas at the right time. But then it's, gear, first, second, third. Okay, neutral, we're going to coast. Here, you never get that, and you're absolutely right. The music cues are of a piece of this entire film. I love that. And I also think then, Jim, that is the perfect time to cut into story.
Sure.
One of the things I kind of noted is that the whole piece, it seems to be set up to undermine our expectations. Every time, and how did you put it the other night regarding the bullying in high school, the anti-Semitic bullying?
Well, you know, I thought it would. I always worry that you know, the whole bully storyline is gonna sidetrack everything. You know, that it's gonna take it over because
Yeah.
it's kind of an easy path. It gets the blood going. You know, it's kind of, yeah, it's just a really easy choice, and I was glad that they sort of that the you know Stephen lay off a little bit, that it wasn't entirely once he changed to the high school in California, that it wasn't entirely informed by the bullying. It was
Yeah.
to some extent, and I think that's where the girlfriend Monica coming in sort of was a nice bookend to
Yeah.
that part of his life. But yeah, they sort of hinted that it would, you know, lead to huge violence. There's a little bit of violence, but he. I think I said to you during the movie, we know he lives. So, spoiler alert, filmmaker's still alive. But anyway, yeah, I was kind of worried that that would take over everything.
Yeah. I myself, I thought at every step we're kind of given a trope, and then he either undermines it or takes a left turn away from it without it being jarring. We're still given all the genre expectations of a Bildungsroman, of a slice of life film, because it really is one of those. But there is, how did you put it? I think we both mentioned it, but I think you're the one who brought it up. Finding our smiles.
Oh yeah,
But
City Slickers reference.
yeah, the mother and son don't necessarily find their smiles in the way you think. The father, it is a really great kind of exploration of a bad marriage, but not a movie stereotype. There is the bastard, there is the picked upon, crushed flower, you know, creative flower, and destroyed, like, you know, some crappy Star Wars. She died of sadness. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Couldn't stay alive for her kids. Okay. But yeah, I think, and also hats off to Paul Dano's performance. Even Seth Rogen in a rather, I can't call it a minor role, a very important role, but a smaller role that everyone holds back enough. But it's also because that's what the thing demands. There are no, you can have a bad marriage with no bad players, no bad people. And I thought that was it. Even the end where he's basically proposing to Monica. How does he put it to his mother later, Jim? In all but I all but said it. She says, you didn't propose. It's like, oh, I all but said it. They're having this great laugh, which is, I think, my favorite moment. Really, that moment where they have a bit of a heart to heart, and it's still a little messy, and then he tells her about how his girlfriend dumped him, but she isn't cruel about it. And she's like, you're just this nice boy to kiss. I'm going to this school. You're going where you're going. What?
Yeah.
You know, even as he's about to give it it's like, don't. No, you're going to have this back. And it doesn't lean into that trope. That last shot of her, she's smiling. She's not, usually they do that. Well, that was your chance and you will never. Yeah. It's like, no, they don't do that. Him and the bully have a moment that in the end feels real, although it's kind of ridiculous. And at no time do you think, oh, they're going to be good friends now.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think it's a way more subtle piece than he usually does. Apparently the box office may not be rewarding Mr. Spielberg, but I think as far as this story goes, and rest assured, when we get into meaning, I will be critiquing this film. I'll be criticizing the film. It's not perfect. But I think as far as it, like you say, Jim, that subtlety, he is this achieved that It will be that one that I'll remember long after the other night. Like I look forward to seeing it again, actually. Like I want to dip back into it. You had mentioned in the spoiler or in the spoiler-free review regarding how did you put it? Oh yes, the Easter eggs.
Oh yeah.
You know?
That's my cue.
That is your cue. But
at
they all
the,
relate to the story. At no time are they just dumped in.
Yeah. Well, so years ago, when the actors studio was still an interview show, was still a thing, hosted by the late great James Lipton, he had Spielberg on, and it was a really good interview. There's clips of it online. There was one great conclusion they came to, but there was one question, and he said, what do you do to prepare for movies?
I'll try and folks put a link to these clips afterwards.
There's several clips of that particular episode, because there's one really great revelation. But he said, what do you do to prepare for a new movie? And he said, I always watch 4 movies. I don't know if this still counts, but it still is his tradition. But he watches Lawrence of Arabia, The Seven Samurai, It's a Wonderful Life, and The Searchers. And when he makes it, which is directed by John Ford, and when he does make it our sort of conclusion, the third act, when he is in John Ford's waiting room, there's a nice big poster of The Searchers right there, right full frame that you can see.
Yeah.
There's a couple other things too. And this was probably just by chance, but when he's invited to the CBS studios, and he gets into the office of the producer of Hogan's Heroes, and he's looking at the board, and it's a point of view shot of him looking directly at a picture of Robert Clary, who played LeBeau. Was that the character's name?
LeBeau.
The French LeBeau. Robert Clary has an amazing story. Jewish French guy, lost 10 out of his 14 siblings, I think, in the Holocaust. Was in a camp where he performed for the officers there, and survived. And within 7 years, he had a show on Broadway. One of these things that you think, how is this not a biopic? How is this not a movie? Because just that whole contrast is crazy. But anyway, that's the shot that it opens up with. Not what the heck's the name of the Bob? What was the lead? Hogan? Who played Hogan?
Oh, anyway. Bob Crane.
Bob Crane, yes. So yeah. Anyway, and it's a fellow Jewish guy in Hollywood perhaps gets a little nod. He just passed away, by the way, at the age of 92. I think November 16th or something. So he was recently in the news. But just a fascinating story and kind of a neat little shot at him. But yeah,
very cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks, if you saw some stuff coming up on the screen there while Jim was chatting away there. I think I've figured out how to get some comments here. But before I try and make that work right now, whoopsie. Sorry about that, my friends. Kind of tipping people off on something. Anyway, Shashank has a question for us, Jim, in the chat. I'll read it out here because I can't put it up on the screen just yet. What do you think is the major reason why Spielberg has lost his box office mojo? Both West Side Story and The Fabelmans have received good reviews, but dismal box office returns.
Mm-hmm.
I got a theory, but you go first, Jim.
Maybe it's not so much Spielberg that's changed, but to paraphrase Gloria Swanson, maybe it's the movie theaters have changed, or the movie experience has changed. I mean, these are pretty, not so much West Side Story, but this one is pretty personal. I think people more go out to see event movies these days. I mean, that's sort of the easy takeaway, but yeah, I don't know. I know DMG was saying that it's not widely released. That might, as widely released as you would think it would have been. So maybe that's part of it. But yeah, no, West Side Story 2. I don't know. Maybe people just aren't into the 50s thing or the retro thing anymore. But the second bully in this actually reminded me of a West Side Story character. A lot of hair acting. You know, the sort of the crazier of the two bullies. I just thought of that now. But I'm like, it's almost like they sort of took a crane and then dropped him right into Northern California there. But yeah, I quite enjoyed West Side Story. Yeah, but yeah, I would just have I would wonder if it's more the movie going experience that's changed in people's expectations. How about you? You said you had a theory brewing there.
Um, I I I think streaming, Jim, like that has done so much. Oh, would you look at that, Jim? It's like I figured something out. Woohoo! Streaming has done so much to change the kind of films we experience in the theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that has that makes so much difference to what gets on screen. Like you think about it, I mean, we both enjoyed Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. But I think in a bit of a rant about craft and everything, I think I say it in some ways. Letitia Wright has to sort of play it big, chew the scenery. They all have to. Those are big movies. You need big characters with a big breakfast. But those are the kind of things that the only reason you're going to go out to, maybe not the only reason, but you need a big draw. Boy, the theme of the word is big. But you need a big movie, a big draw to get you to lay out the cash and the time and the pain in the ass to go to a theater. The Fabelmans, you could tell right away. It's like, I am super glad, Jim, we went to the theater.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? There is still, there is a different experience, even though we're only one of 4 people in the theater.
Yes. and
yeah, go ahead.
And that wasn't all the adventure. The shutter or something, some projectionist thing was off, so it actually effectively closed off an eighth, or maybe what would you say, a fifth of the screen was just black. And so we were watching this lopsided movie. We both actually went out and said something, and they surprisingly
it took them long enough, but they did fix it. Yeah.
It ground down. It actually, the movie physically stopped for a second, and somebody did. It was almost like being at the optometrist's office when they're testing the different lenses out on you, and just went slick, slick, and it was all cleared up. But yeah, it was kind of. I was a little worried, but they redeemed themselves anyways. So
yeah, I think there's a bit of something to be said for what Walt's saying here. He may not appeal to younger tastes. But yeah, I think some of it is that the films he's made of late, although West Side Story, that's a big movie. That's big. You know, a musical, a musical, like that sounds like going to the movies to me. I'm something like The Fabelmans, that doesn't surprise me, because it's also going to be a great streamer. I do think it would behoove you, if you can, check it out in the theater. It is a filmmaker's it's a filmmaker's movie. Multiple sections shot on film. We saw it in the credits. 35 mil, 16 mil, 8 millimeter, and it looks it, but it's also super cinematic. You know, even the home movies, you know, feel like, oh, well, there's a professional. There's Janos Kuzminski behind that Super 8. But I think some of it's just the nature of going to movies has fundamentally changed. People really do. They have many choices on for their entertainment time, and even more choices, Jim, on their how do I put this? Streamer, renter. You know, it used to be, oh, that's a renter. Now it's, do I just wait until it's out on streaming? You know, I could wait, you know? And so I think this film in particular, I wouldn't be surprised. But who knows? Maybe it'll have a lot of legs. It'll certainly be talked about starting next month, Oscars, you know, as the Oscar chit-chat starts. So it'll be discussed. Where it'll land in that discussion, well, we'll just have to wait and see. But, yeah. Anyway, great question, Shashank. And I'm not there. I don't want to completely, you know, I don't know about you, Jim. There may be something to the, no. Younger tastes, contemporary tastes. It may be just that, you know. It ain't a superhero movie, that's for sure.
You know, we're coming out with...
And West Side Story was a remake of something that made a lot more sense in the 60s, you know.
So the whole listing thing that comes to movies is, last week it was the Sight and Sound poll. This week it's the year-end polls, and everyone's all about, you know, the sort of toxicity of that is that you didn't include my favorite movie, therefore you're bad. So, and there's a little bit of sort of professional critic pushback from that, especially with something, and to compare is the Michelle Yeoh movie. What the hell is it?
Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
Yes. And you know, so is that the movie that folks are expecting to see in the theaters these days, or is it something more like The Fabelmans? And they're both shaped like movies, but they're quite a different product, you know, in the end. So.
And I think almost, and this might be actually, it might almost be better to compare this to Nope. And I'll be interested to see how the math plays out there. But before we get into that, Jim, I think it is time to talk about what we're going to watch next week. And there might have been a spoiler alert. We may be sticking you with a bit of a choice, folks. It really depends on can we get to see one. But Jim, do you want to talk about what both movies that we might like? One of them we're going to pick for next week.
Yeah, I was. I just had to review there because I almost forgot. I think we were talking about going to see Avatar. Was one of them.
Yes.
You know, but what was the other one that we were talking about?
Emily the Criminal.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And
which is now available on Netflix, by the way.
It is
for free. Yeah.
So, folks, just one of the reasons. I had mentioned, and then I clipped it out. I'm going to put it out as a separate clip. Jim and I chatted about it right after, and I'm still nervous, Jim. All the positive pre-reviews, notwithstanding, you know, I'm sure Guillermo del Toro is a wonderful man with a great taste in film, but he has a vested interest in the success of somebody in James Cameron, because they're working together. A lot of this it's that level of hyperbole that makes me think of Wonder Woman 1984. So if we can see it, and we come out of it, and this is something Jim and I have worked pretty hard. It doesn't always happen, but over the last several months, we've tried to go, okay, if we're going to talk about a movie on Sunday, we're going to talk about a movie we're not interested in seeing, but interested in talking about. That is one of those, hey, this is worth everyone's time. This is worth our time to talk about. We'll have something interesting to say, even if we just keep on crapping on it. You know, whereas Avatar may end up being, well, it was technically proficient, and you know. And so, whereas Emily the Criminal, this is something, and this is mostly my fault. I've been dropping the ball on this film, and we were going to talk about it a while ago. It's not like it's gone stale. So
no, and Aubrey Plaza's fresh off second season of the very popular White Lotus. So
yeah. So it'll be timely. Again, folks, next week we will be watching a movie. It could be Avatar: The Way of Water. It could also be Emily the Criminal. Who knows? Stay tuned. Combine them. You know what? This is a perfect time to once again ask for everyone to like, subscribe, and what else? That's right, Jim. Ringy ding that bell. All right. Let's now, Jim. Let's get into meaning, and I think it's a perfect time to start with my favorite line, which was at the dinner party. Judd Hirsch spinning some BS about his circus time. And yes, folks, apparently Spielberg did have an uncle who ran off to the circus, was a circus performer. But there was a great moment, and one of the kids, "You're lying," and someone else says, I think it was Paul Dano, if Jim's memory serves, says, "He's not lying, he's telling a story." And as far as I'm concerned, Jim, that is, like, in many respects, that's the whole movie here. Or so much of the whole movie here is, I'm telling you a story, of how I remember it, of how I want to remember it, how I, but what do you think Spielberg wants us to take away from this film? What do you think would make him happy if he was watching this?
Well, there's another thing too.
If he gave a about what we're doing.
Yeah. It's so run through with ideas of storytelling and questions of storytelling. There's one point, and I don't have the exact line, but the father wants Sammy, Mr. Fabelman wants Sammy to become an engineer so he can study algebra and do something that the father does, which is make something real. And there's sort of an, in what the father thinks, there's, inference that stories aren't real. It's just sort of pastiche. It's bullshit. It's decoration. It's not important. When in fact, I think the opposite is true. I mean, life is basically numbers and stories, if you really think about it. But it's that when the second he said, you should make something real or something to that effect, I just thought, that you still don't understand. As smart as you are, you still don't get the importance of story, and how it really sort of powers us all. But even though the father did recognize that lying storytelling kind of differentiation there, but the whole movie is like this. There's lines there. I think a lot of it is a young Sammy trying to define for himself what he's going to do and what he's going to be. The father says to him at one point, still trying to understand what his son does, as it always has been. Yeah. He says, we're a lot alike in what we do. I mean, you with your hobby movies and
your little hobby movies.
With my project management, we're still trying to get people to do things in a certain way and create something. So that's when he's a little bit more sympathetic.
Well, and then he's also trying to connect with his son. He's looking he's looking for himself in his son. He knows the relationship he has with his mother. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then and also there's that Judd Hirsch thing that we talked about earlier about, where Sammy's getting a little bit hipster snotty about being a filmmaker. He says, lion taming isn't the same thing. And he goes, aha. And he sort of says, that's what you think, kid. But I mean, that all of that is Sammy, I think, trying to define for himself what he is and what he's going to be. Yeah. And the conclusion of the movie is
what is art and its
What is art?
value.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was also intrigued by the ending, like the very final shot, the very final scene is him in the in the office with John Ford for his 5-minute
Jack
sort of
apparently is what they called him back in
crazy
the day.
Jack Ford meeting.
Yeah.
That's not unkind, but it's a little bit rough around the edges. And he gives him some advice. He says, you know, horizons up here are good, horizons down here are bad, horizons in the middle are boring. Now get the fuck out of my office, or
Yeah.
you know, something like that. And he leaves, and he doesn't say another word, and he just basically, they show him exit. There's a little joke in the
Yeah.
end, but he's walking down the lot, the avenue of the
Yeah.
lot. He hasn't been promised a job.
No.
He, you know, at no point does he said, "Hey kid, you're going to make a great director." But he's still, you can tell he's got that elation, like he's almost sort of floating off the ground, just having learned something from this director. And I think maybe that's like, he just, oh, all of a sudden I feel smarter. You know, I'm a little further on my way.
I got a
perhaps.
little advice from a real director. Yeah. No. Some of my favorite experiences, my favorite, there were compliments that I received. I still remember showing the second short film to a director I was working for and his DP, and they're like, and it was hilarious. Just bring me your best. I just want to see your best. And by then I'd made a few shorts, a couple of industrial films, or what were called back in the day industrials, you know, corporate video. So I brought this, and I remember the DOP saying, "Oh, what'd you shoot that on?" And I said, "A Bolex." I shot it on Bolex. He's like, "Old school." And he was just there, and they were both engaged, and they got what I was trying to do. And it was like, I felt legit. And then afterwards I said, "I'm really proud of that. I know it's just a crappy industrial, but it was first time I got paid to write. This is even before you, Jim, paid to write a screenplay." And he's like, never, it was like a moment, or here's a Hollywood director telling me, never run down your own work. Plenty of assholes that do that for you. And I was
Good
like,
advice.
wow, I'm getting advice. Like, I mean, it's like, oh, I'm good, you know. We do have a couple of comments here.
Yeah.
You know what, Walt, I'm going to come back to you on this one. Because I have more to say than we have time on this. But I didn't want you to think. And then we got a comment from a couple more from Walt. I like this. A legacy film a la 8.5. You know what? That's an interesting. And that reminds me. There's a Vegetables movie I have still not watched. I'm feeling a little bad. What about you, Jim? Have you seen 8.5? Is that Fellini flick?
I think I've seen parts. You know, as a kid, I always used to have the late. I was a night owl, and I always used to have the late show on before I reluctantly fell asleep. And I think I've seen parts of it on. You know, CKND was the local, what's now global. Had a great. Whoever programmed their filming was a great soul, and threw a lot of great stuff up there. So I think I've seen parts of it, but not all the way through. Not the attention that it deserves, I don't think.
Then there. It's just like, I mentioned this at the top of the show. It's like, geez, Walt, you just tune out when I talk? It's like, I'm here for Jamoico. Anyway, one more thing before we move, before I have some more to say about meaning. Shashank says, what do you think is the reason behind Spielberg wanting to make this film at this point in his career? Why a semi-autobiographical film at this stage? That's an excellent question, and I have a theory. I mean, he is later in life.
Yeah.
This is a time he's looking back, and he's
looking up his age.
You know, he's thinking about, like he's in interviews about this film and about his parents and everything. The way he blamed one parent and then the other, and learning things later in life, and just discovering things about his family, and just being older and more mature, and kind of going, well, in a teenager, you think they're villains. As a grown-up, you go, well, we're all villains to a degree. You know what? And this could be just he wants to get that last piece of his, because I think it's also a comment on what an artist is and what he thinks about filmmaking, which there's so much in this, it bears re-watching. But a media studies individual like you, Shashank, will be able to go to town. Your profs will go to town on this film. It will come up in film studies courses.
Yeah. Is it not in India yet, Shashank?
He said it wasn't in an earlier comment.
Well, I think Shashank will love it. So.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh, Walt. Then he bailed.
What?
And just Walt and I going back and forth about how his hearing's going or something. What was I gonna say? Shashank. No, this film, meaning, theories. One of the things I think, and it may not be what he meant, but I gotta admit, like this looks at filmmaking and Hollywood and all these experiences through a certain lens of someone, a white male, grew up at a certain time. And this is not to take away from the suffering he experienced as a Jew in post-war California, and of course anti-Semitism is coming back because, for fuck's sakes. Yeah. That said, Hollywood has always been open to talented young white men. And so he has a view of filmmaking and a view of Hollywood that is, very much, well, maybe not rose-colored glasses, because holy crap, this is that orange and teal is leaned into heavily in this film. But it's very much how the artist will suffer. And I've seen this in the same year I saw Nope, where how did that tweet go, Jim, that I'm still embarrassed?
Oh, yeah. What? Talk on. I'll look it up.
Yeah.
Here.
Jim sent me this tweet of a great tweeter and an occasional screenwriter who kind of captured Nope in a way that Jim, myself, and Catherine in an hour and a half could not drill down into, but really does summarize the film. So I think one of the criticisms I would have for this is it is like there's not even a kind of a shrug at it is kind of self-involved in a way. No acknowledgement of the larger world he lives in. And no, like the filmmakers, directors, the driven, they put people's lives at risk. One of his contemporaries, John Landis, notwithstanding that he didn't go to jail for it, murdered an actor and 2 children. Him and his producers and they outright murdered them on the Twilight Zone remake. And they're all worried about getting busted for it and managed to get out of it because, hello, white males, you're making a movie. That's important. You even see some of that in here, just that, well, all these people are just here to do what I'm telling them to do. Like there's, and this is where it's like, it's very much a very rich and powerful individual looking back on his, middle to growing into the upper middle class. And I think that is something that you have to. There's an asterisk, especially in the same year that Nope came out. Jim, have you were able to keep
Yeah,
up that
I got
quote?
it right here.
Yeah.
So the way it starts off, this is from Vinny Mancuso at
And I think
Vinny
we just
Mancuso
for those who have not, we won't go into the whole thread in case somebody out there hasn't seen Nope yet.
Yeah.
But the first one, just go.
Well, he starts, watches Nope, the movie about a giant monster whose core looks like a camera that hangs over Hollywood and quite literally chews people up, and spits them out. Is this movie even about anything? As it says, as if somebody else is asking. And then further on, he says, watches Keke Palmer feed the Hollywood beast a 20-foot tall cowboy effigy until it explodes, and when the dust settles, what's left is a black man on a horse framed like a Western hero. So I think that's the one you're more referring to.
No, it's the first one.
Oh, no?
Oh, yeah.
It was the first one. Okay.
Yeah, it's that drilling in, that understanding. And Nope really does look at filmmaking from the perspective of crew and the animals and the children that work. It's from the bottom. And this is not looking at it that way. That said, that does not take away that only it's an asterisk on your on my understanding of the film, not oh, don't go see it because of these things. You know what? If we couldn't see movies written from a working class perspective, if the only movies we could see is we'd see like 3 movies, maybe only 2 in a year, and we'd be, well, I guess we'll watch a fire now. We'll watch a replay of something, some Russian bullshit from 1966. I do. The other thing I think that's missing here is one of the earlier lessons when I was in. Movies don't want to get made. No movie, no script is going, I must be produced. Nope, they don't want to get made. They have zero interest in being made. And so there's this kind of idea that it only takes that driven, truly megalomaniacal person to get something done, to gift us with this genius. Here's the thing, folks, and we're going to go to the John Ford anecdote in a second. But film business, because the pot of gold at the end of the film business rainbow is so big. If you win so big, such a huge win if you win, that it's incredibly competitive. And when you get that much money and that much competitiveness, you need to know someone. It's super nepotistic, and it's you don't need to be a megalomaniac to make a movie, to make art, but to make your movie, yeah, you probably got to. It's set up for sociopaths. I'm not saying Steven Spielberg's a sociopath, but at the same time, there's a whole bunch of justification for why you'll be torn into your art, your family, and it's like, well, that just seems to be like a great excuse for having a bad marriage and not taking care of your children. And so I think that needs to be kept in mind. And let's go back to the John Ford anecdote, and I will put the link. You watch that John Ford anecdote. He actually met the guy when he was like 15. He was visiting cousins in LA, and somebody it wasn't like in the film where he wrote letters and, somebody picked his letter out. No, he had an in. There was somebody who knew somebody. The guy who was developing Hogan's Heroes, he had an in. And that guy, Cheryl, bring in the 15-year-old. Like, that's what he wants to do. No, he had an in. He had a connection. And so he went in, and then he's introduced to John Ford. I suspect, I have not read, and I do want to read, there's a great HBO documentary, like well-reviewed HBO documentary on him. There's been books written. I should know this stuff. I should research more. He is one of the great auteurs, especially of the kind of movies Jim and I watch. That said, I suspect that wasn't the only in he used to get in, you know. So yeah, I think that's kind of missing. But enough of my communist nonsense. Jim, what do you think, like, Spielberg is saying about story and meaning?
Well, I think
I
it's
know that's a
interesting.
left turn, but
No, I think, again, that I think they're driving in the car. It's Mr. Fableman and Sammy, Bert and Sammy, and they're driving along. And when he's saying, I want you to do something like I do, as I mentioned before, make something real. Like, these movies you're making aren't real. And I think it's notable that that is phrased as it is, coming after COVID, when a lot of us were sort of trapped in a little bit of a sort of in our own envelopes, where the only thing that a lot of us had to turn to, and we weren't even in Canada, we weren't even all that superimposed on. Other places were much more hard done by in terms of isolation measures and things like that. And
China.
So the importance of the arts became huge. Like, everyone talks about, could be something like the Tiger King, but or what have you. But there was all these sort of series that or movies or whatever that people were talking about that they got into. So many hobbies that people got into, but also a lot of it depended on the arts. I finally got a chance to read this author when I was off from work, that kind of thing. And so that really, what exactly is the importance of the arts? It's not nothing, and I think we sort of devalue it. And I think that's maybe not front and center, but it's definitely a part of this. What he does is as real as making a widget, or making a tube for the computer, or something his father's actually got his own Wikipedia page, independent of him being
of his contributions
Stephen's
to computer
dad.
science and engineering. Yeah.
But at the same time, one thing is as real as the other. You just can't hold, a story. That's about the only difference. So I think that's a big part of it. The maybe the undervaluing of the arts, in a sort of roundabout way.
Yeah.
But I think that's definitely part of the movie.
Yeah. That leads me to another question, but I'm going to put a pin on that. First of all, Dragon Movie Guy.
Yeah. Hey, he was here a little earlier, I think.
No, it's just how you doing, man? Apparently he enjoyed it. I actually was thinking of doing a reaction video to his video on this film.
How about a reaction to the special effects? He's got like 9 cameras. He's got like a crew. I keep on thinking that the security guard's going to toss him out of the parkade there, but I was, he must have an in.
Yeah.
The security garage.
I want to qualify myself. Walt says, hey, Rob, I push back. This is a personal story of what made this young kid a mega successful director. Looking at bigger issues would not work in a project like this, I think. And I think I was going there, and maybe I didn't finish the job properly. You're absolutely right. Would it work? It would be a different movie. It is his story. Spielberg's story. What I think the audience needs to do, though, is be aware of the larger world and those. And again, in a world of Nope, I'll always have an asterisk by this movie, but that doesn't mean it. Does it take away? No, it's just like anything. We see it in context. To watch a movie and not acknowledge the thing outside the frame, I think is really kind of doing a disservice to the film experience. Of course, Jim and I, as we're watching it, hopefully we're immersed in the film to get that full emotional experience. And I think you can tell we both enjoyed it. We sympathized with characters. All that stuff's going on. But yeah, I take your point, and yeah, could you? You know how you do it. You go watch Nope after, you go, there is another way of looking at film, especially film production. Jim, what do you think Spielberg in this film was saying about art? Because that is literally the question. Jack Ford, Jack, they called him Jack. Ford asks him in the film is, what do you know about art? What do you know about art? What do you like that? The very, and it's like, so what do you think Spielberg is saying about art? About what is art?
What do you see? What do you see, kid? And I'm like, I was thinking of how I would answer. It's like, a couple of guys in the desert. But
no, but that was in the first question.
Yeah.
What do you know about art? All right, well, go look at. Obviously, you don't know shit, so I'm not going to teach you something.
I don't know if it's. Yeah, I was mostly looking at this in terms of the role. I think my big takeaway is the role of the artist is always being partially a little bit of an outsider, or that thing that you have to sacrifice something to be an artist, whether it's relationships or being able to concentrate on relationships or what have you. The Uncle Boris said it's either your family or your art, but it basically can't be both. Can't be both. You got to choose one.
Torn in two.
Yeah. And so that's sort of what I was thinking of, because the whole thing is him. I mean, like anything in your teens, it's your identity. It's how you identify yourself. It's how you come to know yourself too. So I think that's a bigger part of it. In terms of art, what did you think? I was mostly concentrating on the role aspect of it.
You know what, Jim? It's a great question. I think one of the things for sure, and you alluded to it before, or you spoke to it before, but I think we can make it clear, is the importance of art and the legitimacy of art. Mm-hmm. Maybe not necessarily what art is, but that art has value at all.
Yeah. And
that is definitely, that is a position this film firmly takes that I firmly, I think that's a class neutral, thing. Art does have an intrinsic value. I once did one of those 20 by 20 talks where I was saying, you know what, events are a human need. We have parties. Parties are a human need. We do them. We don't need to be told to or have to, or we do them. We get enough people together, eventually they'll find some reason to throw a party. It could be the lamest. How many parties have we been to just for ridiculous reasons? It's just the excuse to get together and celebrate the simple miracle of life. And I think art is in that same bundle. People make art. It's going to happen. You can try to suppress it. You can manipulate it. You can co-opt it. But what you can't do is get rid of it. Mm-hmm. Even the Nazis, well, it's interesting you went there, Rob, but the guy did make Jaws. Another thing, and DMG's referred to this about a love letter to his parents. I do think another thing, it is one of the themes explored, was how sympathetic, I guess younger filmmakers, younger writers, when they're exploring relationships, there's almost always it's a lot more Manichean. There's a bad girlfriend, or I was a bad boyfriend, or I was a bad partner, or whatever. There's a good person and a wrong person, and big mistakes are made. This is only, I would always wager that was an older person that could come up with maybe it just wasn't working, that the people were different. They both loved each other. Like, this is a film that says they loved each other. They still do. Like, I mean, Paul Dano comes across as a great dad. You know, even at the end where you're having a panic, like a bit of a tearjerker moment where, you know, see, your mother did this. What did you do? I made her tea. And he rubs his back. He cares lovingly cares for his son, nurtures him, and then even says, listen, I don't get it, but if this is what you got to do, then this is what you got to do. You know, there's not even that family conflict, which is always taken to 11 in so many other films, is dealt with so honestly and legitimately and lovingly, you know? Yeah, I may be getting a little bit of a tear now. So yes, I think that.
And there's still differences there. Like there's still differences in how the father and son see the world, but that doesn't devalue their relationship at all.
No,
as they're in their 2-bedroom dude apartment.
Divorce. It's a camp divorce.
I sleep in a race car.
Well, and even I felt the pain, and it's interesting how Paul Dan, how the father, Bert, reacts. Is that little bit of picture of, because yes, and Spielberg's mom, I want to say her name's Kitty. That wasn't the woman's name. Certainly wasn't Mitzi. Anyway, she did marry the.
Yes,
they did get a divorce after he had already left. You know, went to school. They got a divorce, and she did end up marrying the guy. You know that. You know, she loved differently. You know.
Yeah.
Like it. You know. Yeah. It is. It's that movie star who's like, I would do anything for this director. Sure, I like the producer, but I fell in love with the sets guy. You know, which happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. I'm just gonna put this into a bunch of cuts, Jim, of me and my contribution to the overthinking analogies in filmmaking.
It's right there in the title.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, here, folks, this is a question for you, Jim. I think we are kind of probably time to move on, but a question for you, and a question for everyone in the chat, or if you're watching this on a replay. Let us know in the comments. Of course, the classic definition of fable is a moral story, almost always aimed at children, where with talking animals. You know, Aesop on. But it's also, there's an archaic term for it, and let me. It was part of my research. Just a sec. Bear with me. To tell fictitious tales. The quote is, I do not dream or fable. Which meaning do you think he was going after here?
Yeah, I mean,
there was monkey business.
Yeah.
Which was like that tense, what a great scene, like a killer scene of tense family cross-talking arguments.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before, like he could have given him any name, and he chose the Fabelmans. Ergo, it must have been important.
It's got a meaning.
Yeah, you know, I saw that same definition, the usually involving animals and plants, and I'm like, oh, there's got to be something a little bit more here. But
I think I found that more.
Yeah.
The telling of tales, fictitious tales.
Yeah.
Remember, it's not lying; it's a story.
And it's funny too, the whole notion of, even ever since I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and you know, that whole thing that.
Hello,
folks. This is not an auto. This is not a documentary, but
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but it is. He does. it's semi-autobiographical. It's certainly seen through that lens of memory. And,
Pretty close.
we as much as construct, all based on previous stories he's told about his past, as we all do. Our memories are reconstructed stories. They usually are based on some level of fact, but as you tell them, like the story I love to make you tell at dinner parties, about you and your wife running in or connecting in Japan.
Oh yeah.
And now he got worried. Eventually there'll be clowns and a tuba band.
Be like a Frank Capra movie or something. Yeah.
But it's DMG says, and I do. Jim and I did talk about it earlier. DMG, I think it was one of your favorite scenes was that sequence. It's really like two scenes when they meet and in the interrogation, and then all of a sudden, let me pray, let me breathe Jesus into you. But there's a part of me.
Is that what we're doing?
Yeah. There's a great, if you see pictures of Spielberg when he was younger, he was not as handsome as Mr. LaBelle. No. But when he was a skinny young kid, like they were all skinny young kids, right? But he had a bit of a schnoz. And there's a part of me thinking either he was doing it because maybe he was a little smoother than Sammy is, or because he did grow up in a house full of women. Like, I mean, you'd think he'd have some smoothness just from there. Or the girl's going, you know what? I bet you the schnoz ain't the only thing that's big.
The interesting thing about that relationship,
wonderfully charged with like sexuality without you feeling dirty.
Yeah.
I don't feel like a voyeur.
She's in charge that whole time, like their whole relationship. She's the one in charge, which is kind of
right to the end. Yeah, she charged the beginning. The beginning, even I don't know if I can get that camera. Just don't worry. Daddy will lend it to you. It's like, you are Daddy's little girl, aren't you? But she's confident, like full on confident, throughout the entire thing.
Character.
And the actress, Chloe East, delivers. There's two actors that like newer, younger actors where it's like, wow, the camera just loves that person. The camera loves her, and the camera loves the guy who played Logan. Yeah. All right, Jim. What? I think it's that time. Let's talk about the grade we're going to give this thing. Are we going to pass Mr. Spielberg?
Yeah.
Is he worthy of a? Whoopsie! Sorry about that, folks. What do you think? What are you giving to him?
Yeah, I'm not as cruel as I should be sometimes, and I'm also not as generous as I should be. Let's give him an A+. I'll give him an A+. It was, the other thing too, 2.5 hour long movie went by like a rocket. It did not feel 2.5 hours, which I think is an achievement.
With a lot going on, but I think those more. Yeah, it is a bit of a it is got a bit of a melodramatic vibe. It goes over years. There is actual suffering, not, there is a bit of, and so I think those kind of family things, they should, you need time to get to know the players we need to know. Jim, I think an A+ is, it's worthy of an A+, notwithstanding my, political criticisms. It's, it's an excellent example of a white male, a rich white male, looking back on his middle, is almost idyllic middle class upbringing.
Come to think of it, I did succeed. The end.
Okay, Jim. That out of the way. Any final thoughts?
plenty of final thoughts.
So many final thoughts.
So many. I got some factoids here that I just discovered that I found are really interesting. I did want to say, though, that after years and years of Spielberg filming other fictional characters or close to fictional characters, family chaos, if you want to look back at Close Encounters of the Third Kind, as just being like a crazy household, he actually, or E.T. Et al., he actually gets to film his own family, his thinly disguised family.
Yeah.
Their chaos. And I thought, man, what a dream that probably was for him, because that was the seed from which everything grew. Yeah. So that was kind of, a grace note, I think, on the end of this one. We talked about Actors Studio. The one other thing that they mentioned on the Actors Studio interview was, he said, how did they finally connect the aliens and the humans at the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind? And he said, well, through music and technology. And he said, what did your father do? He said, well, he was into technology. And what did your mom do? And she said, oh, she was a musician. And he kind of went, whoa. And it was just this beautiful moment. You can find it on YouTube. Three other quick notes. Crystal the monkey is in it. Crystal the monkey is the same monkey that's this is the actual name, Annie's boobs in Community.
Oh, no way.
Hangover Parts 2 and 3. Just a huge... We Bought a Zoo. Has an IMDb page that goes back to 1997.
How old is this fucking monkey?
I'm pretty old.
Wow.
Julia Butters, who played one of the sister with the glasses, she was the kid who made Leo DiCaprio cry in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That little girl that sort of sidled up to him and they had a chat. And,
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same actress.
Yes.
That blew me away. And then Jeannie Berlin is one of the mothers-in-law. I believe it was Arnold or Bert's mom. So Sammy's grandmother is actually Elaine May's daughter. Mm-hmm. The great Elaine May, who's still alive.
Yeah.
And then lastly, a young kid named Lane Factor is one of the scouts. He's in Reservoir Dogs, a great show if you haven't watched it yet. So just... Cool. I was so blown away by bam, 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 one thing after the other when I was.
Some of that doesn't surprise me though, Jim. He is Steven Spielberg. Yeah. He can get some people to get in his movie.
Well, a good representation of young talent as well. Yeah. It's really are these going to be people that we're going to be watching for the next?
I know, because he's never done that before. I've never seen a Spielberg movie with child actors who do much of anything, either in the film or with their lives later.
Not that I'm surprised, but it's sort of they get equal time. It's kind of a nice bit.
I think I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
cool. For myself, Jim, honestly, I look forward to seeing this movie, and I look forward to having that night where I see, or maybe it's a 2-night thing, because they're both intense movies in their own way. But putting this side by side with Nope, and maybe even coming back to both these films sometime well after Oscars, because they're both gonna be talked about. But yeah, I'm glad we saw it in the theater. I think there's so much more we can say about it.
Yeah,
we just don't have the. You know what? Sooner or later, the show's gonna end.
Go see it, kids.
Walt65 says, 2.5-hour movie that went by like a rocket. Something that cannot be said about, quote, the best movie of all time, close quote, according to Sight and Sound. Because he couldn't resist. I understand that. Shashank says, where are we? Loved the deep take. Has them stoked to watch the film. Yeah, Shashank, I'm looking forward to your take on it, Shashank. And then DMG says, Lorraine Baines, Marty McFly's mom from Back to the Future.
Is that Jeannie Berlin? I guess I didn't see that part. She's also in Hunters too. The mother-in-law there. So
That was Leah Thompson played the mom. Are you thinking?
Oh yeah.
Leah Thompson's mother. Her character's mother. Yeah. Anyway, and then.
Oh yes. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Apparently, he gave the Fabelmans 4. You know what? DMG, and you know what? Comment DMG with a link to your video, and I will watch it. Now that Jim and I have had our take, I can now watch yours without it, entering my opinion. Although I might go, oh, that was really good. I should have stolen that. Anyway, I think that's about it. Ooh, look at this. Walt 65. Yeah, Walt. See it. Yeah. You know what? Well worth that.
Probably won't be very crowded.
Yeah. If you would, Walt, you want to see it in the theaters. Anyone who hasn't seen this film, I think the theaters is worth it. For a number of good reasons. Then you better go see it now, because I suspect it's not going to last in there long. All right. With that said, I think once again, Jim and I will watch either Avatar, by the Way of Water, or Emily the Criminal, and give you our deep dive next weekend. I believe I've seen one vote from Walt 65 for Emily, and who knows, if we do end up doing The Way of Water, I'll elaborate on my.
We'll give you a warning.
We'll give you a warning, and I will elaborate on my comments regarding James Cameron and a lot of these other capital B big pictures. All right, I don't think we have anything else to say, Jim.
Walt's got a new video on Tunes of Glory. If you guys want to see that one
Ooh.
as well, it's a couple weeks back. But
all right,
yeah.
Okie doke. Good night, everybody.
All right, see ya, folks. Have a good one.
Not a bad show, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all cut off.
Yeah. All right, and